Hi, welcome back to Podium Pop. I'm Grace here with my co-host Celine, and we have the Japanese Grand Prix race recap for you guys. Before we get into everything, make sure you're following us on all of our socials on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. We post there sometimes, and we post on Spotify and YouTube. So make sure you are subscribed, giving us 5 stars if you think we earned it. And let's get started. Let's pop the bottle and get started with today's episode.
That was a good one.
That was
First try.
One. Yeah. we are unfortunately re-recording this on Tuesday evening when we usually record on Sundays and post on Mondays because we were on vacation and we filmed the episode, and I guess the Wi-Fi cut out and only recorded half of it. So
yeah, and to be completely honest, it probably was best that it did get deleted. It was a rough episode only because this was the last night of our vacation.
Yeah.
We were exhausted. I was extremely
so
hungover, and it probably, we're probably going to give a better, more, valuable episode. Sophisticated, a little less zombie-like episode the second go around than we had the first time. So you know what? Someone was looking out for us and went ahead and made sure that we took care of that. So
yeah, for sure.
Should
we get started?
Yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So, gosh, now that we accidentally had to push it back 2 days, it's kind of hard to remember everything that happened even before the race.
Yeah, that's so fair.
So touching on a little bit of that, we obviously are coming off of Australia, where we had the whole Logan Sargent Williams debacle.
That's right.
We've, touched on this so much. We not to beat what is it? What is the phrase? Beat something.
Beat a dead horse.
Maybe I shouldn't use that one.
Yeah,
I should come up with a better phrase for that. But not to, keep going about
running
the same
after
thing.
the marathon's already done.
Did you come up with that, or did you hear that before?
It just hit me.
Yeah, that was good, actually.
Thank you.
Not to keep running after we cross the finish line.
Yeah.
Let's turn the Formula 1. Not to keep driving after.
Not to keep driving.
Not a Dorian Pin reference.
Oh. Oh my gosh.
Oh, anyways, we'll move on that. But, talking about Williams, we weren't sure if they were even going to have that second car for the Japan Grand Prix. They really pushed it to the limit and didn't really fully announce that it was going to be there until 24 hours before FP1.
Yeah, I remember I was getting nervous, so.
I was getting very nervous. So thank goodness they did have both of the cars, but that led to some more controversy. And once again, Williams making horrible decisions that affect their PR, and I don't particularly agree with. But for the car, the chassis that had all of the repairs made to it, that was originally Alex's original chassis that got destroyed in Australia. That one, they decided that Logan would race in it.
Yep.
And Alex would keep Logan's car that didn't have any of the recent repairs. Mm-hmm. It's very frustrating. Knowing now what we know, it didn't particularly affect anything major. I think I'm happy with how the weekend turned out for Logan. I'm sure Logan is as well.
Did affect something major.
Well, in FP1, but not in the race.
Wait, what?
It didn't do anything to him in the race, right?
To Logan.
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought we were talking about Alex.
No. The switch didn't happen.
Okay.
Didn't affect anything. Now Logan did crash out, and FP1 it wasn't anything super bad. They got the repairs done, and I don't know. I don't think it necessarily had anything to do with the car. It was definitely a driver mistake.
Yeah.
But before we know what we know now, I was very frustrated. This is a car that was really destroyed. It got, a patchwork, fix and traveled across, and it was a very quick fix and all this stuff. I was worried that it would affect something. I'm obviously glad it didn't, but I do think it's frustrating that Williams keeps making these calls that I don't understand. Like, Logan is still paying for the mistakes of Alex from 2
Yeah.
weeks ago.
You know what I found out too? So teams are they have curfews on when they can work on the car for like race weekends in the garage.
Hmm.
And so like I don't know, for say like the curfew's 10 p.m. track time. By 10 p.m. they have to go. They can't touch it. Like the FAA literally has cameras on the car, A for safety measures, make sure no one's like
Hmm.
gonna steal or something, but B to make sure no one's working on it. Every year teams have two things called, I believe it's called a joker, where they can like hand in their card, say, nope, we need to work on our car. We got to do this. Williams did that in Australia. They used one of their two jokers at the fourth race of the season to switch the chassis. I say that word wrong every time. To move
Chassis.
yeah, whatever. To move it from Alex, or to move it from Logan to Alex's car. They used one of their two so early on to move it over, and the team didn't score any points.
Yeah, it's just so
I
like.
get that they were like so hopeful, thought it could happen, like da da da, like when are we gonna use it? Why not use it now?
Hmm.
But it's like so early in a 24 race season, and they're already having so many issues. Like they already used one of their only. They only have one more left.
Yeah, and also like it sucks. We keep talking about how much it sucks for Logan, which obviously it does. He's definitely getting the shit end of the
Yeah.
stick there. But like also it's gotta suck for Alex too to have all of this pressure. Them basically being like, listen, we
Gosh,
know
it's so
that
much.
right now how Williams is acting, they are basically saying that we don't think Logan's going to score us any points. We don't think he's going to be successful. So this is all going to rely on you. And that's a lot of pressure
It's so much pressure.
to kind of live up to. And we saw that pressure. Not his fault completely, but it definitely, ended up biting him in the butt during the race, which we'll discuss more. Yeah, it was just some very interesting calls made by Williams. Again, I've been very unhappy with Williams' calls lately. A lot of because of the recent, circulation of, because of the recent calls being made by James Vowles. There's been a lot of circulation of the James Vowles before we knew him. As newer fans, which I knew him before, but not. It's hard to connect the two people. It's hard to put them together.
Yeah. I really
Because
didn't know.
yeah, I mean, like the James Vowles from last year was completely different than how he was when he worked with Mercedes.
Yeah. As being a new fan too, I didn't realize like that those clips with Valtteri in the car, like I didn't realize that was James Vowles.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been a little tricked.
Yeah, we've been bamboozled for sure.
We have been bamboozled. James Vowles
once
has
again
been bamboozling us.
Once again, this just proves you can't trust a man.
You can't trust a man. Never will.
It's heartbreaking. So yeah, that was one thing. Did anything else happen before the race this week? It was also kind of hard because we were on vacation, so we weren't as like on social media as we normally are. Yeah, as we normally are, which is pretty much all the time. Before like leading up to a race weekend, so it was a little difficult to kind of keep up with things. But other than, I mean, we did get some good like content. Yuki had a lot of stuff going on, which was super exciting. I love Yuki. I think even the past couple of weeks, or really since the beginning of this season, I've always liked Yuki, but I think recent events have just caused me to kind of root for him a little bit more than I always did, than I did before.
It's the Logan Sargent effect.
Honestly, it is when I love an underdog, and I love, not to say that Yuki's an underdog necessarily because I think he's a better driver than Daniel Ricciardo is.
Yeah.
But I think it's more so like I don't like when teammates that are maybe not as popular with the fans get pushed aside because they don't have the same personality and it has nothing to do with their talent in driving.
Yeah. I get what you're saying.
It's just frustrating. But I think Yuki is amazing. I was super excited for him to have that home race. Red Bull had kind of getting into the race weekend. Red Bull did have a rookie. They every team has to have two sessions that are driven by a rookie throughout this whole season. 2 sessions, right?
Yeah.
and Red Bull used theirs, and I forget the guy's name. Do you know the
RB,
name?
not Red Bull.
RB, right. Well,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
RB,
I
sorry.
know, but like
Yeah. Do you remember the guy's name that
I
did it?
said it last week and I realized I pronounced it wrong. I always forget his first name. Iawasa, I believe is his
Iawasa?
last name. Iawasa. I
Okay.
said it wrong last week.
Yeah, so Iawasa and Yuki did FP1 together, and I just think that probably was such a special moment, not only for Iawasa the rookie, but also for Yuki, and really all of like the Japanese fans. I'm sure that was super
Yeah, it was very
special. So that
exciting.
was exciting.
Yeah.
Did
Should we
anything
get into
else
the Oh,
anything else happen leading up to the
not that I
race?
remember.
Yeah, it's a blur.
It is a blur. I think after
Yeah,
Australia things were like pretty quiet.
yeah, that is true. We had a lot of the drivers go to Bali, which we talked a little bit about the last episode, but for the most part, the last in between Australia and the Japanese Grand Prix, it was pretty
I think my
quiet.
weeks are blurring together.
You're like, wait, what did we? Yeah, no,
No, like,
it's so
did
hard.
did we talk about Bali on the last episode?
Yeah, we talked about Bali because we talked about
Logan and
Charles
Charles. Okay.
and Andreas and Joris being scared of Charles'
Oh yes,
his adventures. Yeah, so we
rightfully
did
so.
discuss that.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
no, I couldn't remember if we talked about that when we like tried to film our episode or not. I got everything
I know it's
confused.
so hard because we missed that full episode. But yeah,
Yeah,
let's go ahead and just get into the race weekend, get started.
yeah.
It
Lap
was a
one
great,
starts. Oh,
yeah.
we went on two
No, I was
different
gonna say,
vibes.
I was just gonna say it was a great race to watch with a lot of action.
It was a great race to watch with a lot of action.
Do you want to go into what you're just about to say about lap one?
Yeah, lap one starts and everyone's okay. That's all that matters. But unfortunately, going into one of the turns, Daniel just missed the fact that Alex Albon was right there on his right and turned into him a bit, sending them both spinning into the barriers, which was really scary, honestly.
Yeah, this
But
literally happened on turn 3 of the
yeah,
first lap.
it's so quick.
It's very
And then the
quick.
race was like immediately red flagged, and it lasted for a half hour.
Yeah, keep in mind
was
this was
long.
also 2 a.m. our time.
Yeah,
We were on vacation. We were exhausted because we got barely any sleep the night before.
because of
We were
qualifying.
out doing things literally all day,
Yeah,
and it was a full half hour red flag. And let me tell you, back to what were we saying?
how we were just up late and tired, and the 30-minute red flag was not working in our favor. It wasn't
Yeah,
in anybody's favor, but
it really was. I mean, yeah, the 30-minute red flag was rough, and the fact that we also didn't even necessarily know how long it would actually last was also a little.
no, I remember at one point I was like, when is the red flag going to be over? And I like looked, because usually they put it up on the screen like race will resume at whatever local time, and I was like, there's not even a resume time yet.
So the crash happened. At first, it was kind of hard to tell why or how it happened. You know, people will say a lot of different things. The presenters, we're watching it on F1 TV. So the presenters, after watching the replays, seem to agree with me and Grace that we think that definitely Daniel Ricciardo was at fault. Some people are saying that it was a blind spot. Some people are saying, anything like that. He obviously didn't check his mirrors. He didn't know that Alex would be there. A racing incident.
Yeah, I feel like he's at fault, but it is a racing incident.
Yeah.
It
Just sucks. It sucks
it
that
does.
it sucks that it was Williams. It sucks that it was Alex. But let me tell you, and if you haven't already seen this, go check it out on TikTok. And Grace did have the funniest reaction to this because
Hilarious.
At first all we saw was an RB and a Williams in the wall.
Yeah.
And
I saw the Williams spinning out.
Yeah. As Logan Sargent fans, unfortunately, we're used to it being Logan, the one that's spinning out.
Yep.
And so it was just instant. Like we were like, "Oh, there goes Logan." And I didn't even think about it. We didn't touch on in the TikTok and in the reaction. But I also was nervous that it was Yuki in the RB, which would just be so sad for his home race to spin out in literally the first lap.
Yeah. Honestly, I just really saw the Williams and I had tunnel vision.
Yeah. No. really, that's all I was thinking about. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it was Alex and Daniel
Yeah.
that did it. And so I think all of the Williams, I think it was very poetic. Unfortunately, again, I don't want either of them to be out,
No.
but I think it is poetic that Williams had to take a step back and say, "Okay, Alex is out. Looks like we're relying on Logan for this race," and Logan kind of had the chance to prove himself. So the race did eventually resume.
Yeah.
Very late. It was like 2:30 by the time that the race
I
resumed.
think it was 1:30.
1:30.
Yeah.
Oh, qualifying was at 2. Race was at
Yeah.
1. So 1:30. Yeah, 1:30 our time. So the race resumed, and then honestly, it was a good race. There was a lot of back and forth. There were a lot of battles going on. So kind of
Yeah.
keeping in touch with we're talking about Logan a lot this episode, but talking about Logan and talking about Williams, Logan was doing really. But no, Logan had a lot of great overtakes. Although he
Yeah,
didn't
he
score
did.
points, I think he did prove that he
He had a
is
good first half of the race.
and honestly, I think he could have been more successful if it wasn't for just the pit stop strategy and the pit stop. Not to say that it all is on the mechanics at Williams. I don't think they could have done anything different, really.
Yeah.
But
The
unfortunately,
pit
he's doing
stop
really good.
timing was poor because he pitted at the same time as 4 other cars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In that same pit stop, I definitely would like to highlight Yuki there because
Oh my gosh, yeah.
he and the RB team, he basically so they basically all pit. It was RB, Logan. It was Yuki, Logan, one of the Alpines,
And a Sauber, I believe.
and yeah, and a Sauber. They all pitted at the same time. Yuki was the last out of that four to pit, and he was the first one out. So
Yuki's reaction was really cute. He said, I think it was afterwards in an interview, he was like, I felt like I had superheroes like doing my pit stop. It was so good.
yeah,
Thank you guys. That was amazing. That was amazing. He was so
yeah.
grateful. It was really cute to see.
It was really cute. And again, I always want good things for Yuki, but it was even more special that he had such an amazing race at his home race weekend.
Yeah.
Other than that time, he had a lot of great overtakes, and he had a lot of great overtakes in a part of the track that is traditionally very difficult to
Yeah,
overtake
he
in.
did.
He had him in the S curves, and it was in front of a bunch of fans, which I'm sure he didn't mean to be showing off, but I'm glad that he was able to.
No, like they loved
Um,
it.
so I was super excited. He had a really good race. Like we touched on before, there was a lot of battles, all throughout the lineup that normally it's like you kind of focus on either the very the top of the pack, the middle of the pack, end of the pack. There's only ever action really in like one of those areas, but there was battles throughout. So again, I focused on the battle with for Logan Williams near the back of the pack, and as well as focusing on the front of the pack with
Mm-hmm.
Charles and Carlos and Max and Checo. And then, of course, there was the battle in the middle of the pack with Fernando, Oscar, and George,
Mm-hmm.
especially near the end.
That was on the
There was
last
just a
lap.
lot of good action to kind of focus on.
Yeah, it was a great race to watch, honestly. It was
Mm-hmm.
fun.
Um, Speaking of Charles, we know it's a very special race for him. It
Mm-hmm.
was the 10-year anniversary for Jules Bianchi, his godfather, having that horrible crash at
Mm-hmm.
Suzuka. So he had a special helmet for him. There was a lot
That
of
was sweet.
good, a good memorial for him, definitely. But I think that everyone was definitely rooting for him because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I I
Like you would
normally,
have loved to see him on the podium for
yeah,
this situation, and he had a great race. He had a great strategy, helping the team come up with the one stop. He was so good, but Carlos is also a fantastic driver in the Ferrari. The Ferrari
hmm
is doing amazing this year in the beginning of the season, and just ultimately in the end, Carlos asked the team, he said, "Are we fighting?" They gave
hmm
him the go ahead, and he passed Charles. And I feel like it would have been more upsetting a bit if like they were battling for so long, but it's kind of like Carlos passed him and there was like a gap. Not
Yeah, no,
instantly, but
Charles.
he had a good gap.
Yeah, I think everyone, like I said, everyone was rooting for Charles and everyone wanted him to do good. But at the end of the day, they were trying to get on the podium. And I think that if they would have not made the call to let Carlos and Charles, actually race and fight it out,
Yeah.
I think that it could have, there's a chance Ferrari wouldn't have gotten third at all.
Yeah.
A
I
chance.
agree.
I mean, we don't know.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing also is that, like Carlos was obviously faster. He overtook him and then he really like pulled away.
Mhm.
So it was the right call by Ferrari to let them do that.
Mhm.
But as soon like before we even like fully processed, like we
Oh
were
my
watching
gosh.
the race, me and Grace looked at each other. We're like, the fans are gonna be at each other's throats about this
That's why I'm
because
not getting on Twitter for 3 days.
not getting on Twitter for 3 days. Charles and Carlos fans always just have a bit of a history of not always agreeing who should be like the first driver. And,
Yeah.
not that there is a first driver. I don't think in Ferrari, or at least not an obvious one. But they always kind of have that tension. So for something like this to happen, it was scary.
Having a field day, which I do understand the fact that in the past Charles has asked if he was battling Carlos and the team said no, hold position. So I understand being upset about that, but I mean, obviously the team thought this time it was the right decision to make. Maybe they were thinking the same thing. Maybe they thought that I was going to say Lando and the McLaren would come and pass them, but I don't think he would have.
Yeah, I mean, I also don't know if Lando would have caught him. I think it
No,
would
I
have
don't
maybe
think
been that
so.
Lando was closer. To be
Yeah.
completely honest, Lando wasn't that far off of Charles by the end of the race.
They just had a bad strategy this week.
Yeah, so it's I don't know. It's always a what could have happened, a what if
Yeah.
game. But I think Carlos definitely deserves to be on podium. I think he deserved that third place.
Also, Carlos is obviously he's a good driver. He's, there's no questioning that, but Carlos right now is driving to show these other teams that what kind of driver he is, what he will do. Like every position gained is helpful for him for all these teams to see. And obviously there's no doubt in my mind that he's going to have a seat for next year, but I mean, if he's performing well, what's to say it's not going to show these upper teams and be like, well, look at what Carlos is doing. Do we want to have him instead?
Yeah, I think also the biggest thing about Carlos is if you have to look at everyone on the track right now on the grid, I think he's like the hungriest right now, and he's
He
the one
is.
that like there's definitely plenty of other drivers in the same position as him where they don't know if they have a seat for next year, they don't know what their future holds. But I think Carlos has even more of that hunger and that need to prove people wrong because of one, who took his seat, how they took their seat, how the news was announced that his seat was gone, kind of thing. I think that is definitely is so crazy. I think it's definitely lighting a fire under him to really prove like, hey, and I think also Carlos wants to prove that not only is he a great racer, but he's a consistent racer.
Yeah.
And he's definitely doing that. He's the only person that has been on all 3 podiums that he has, or all of the races, so 3 races that he's participated in, because he the whole appendix thing, that he's been on the podium. And I really hope that that continues, because that'll be just awesome to kind of have under his belt when talking with other teams. But yeah, as of right now, we don't know where his future is, but I know he'll have a seat for next year.
Yeah, he will.
It's going to depend on if he has a good seat for next year, because of just logistics and politics and timing is always so tricky. So I hope he gets a good team for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I agree.
Focusing a little bit on the mid-range, we had a pretty good battle between Fernando, Oscar, and George near the end. Well, Fernando and Oscar were kind of near each other throughout the whole race, and then George kind of caught up. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I'm gonna let you do it. You are much better explaining this than I would be.
Okay, so
Sorry.
this is no, you're fine. So basically, I just felt like I was talking a lot, so I wanted to give you a chance. But
No, you're fine.
okay.
You know some of the technical terms better than I do.
Well, I think I do. Sometimes I just yap and hope for the best.
No, go for it. Go for it.
But basically, Fernando, Oscar, and George were battling out. This was for 6th, 7th, and 8th because we had Lando, the Ferraris, and the Red Bulls ahead of them. Oscar was stuck behind Fernando for a while. It was so very similar to how he was stuck behind Lewis. I made the joke during the race how he keeps getting stuck behind these world champions and he can't get past them. He was stuck behind Fernando for a long time. And right now, Fernando and Aston Martin, they don't have they know that their battle is not with McLaren right now. They know that their battle is with Mercedes. Yeah. Once they get past Mercedes, then they'll kind of set their sights on McLaren. But right now, they are focused on Mercedes. If George, I think, was quicker. And if George would have gotten past Oscar and been battling Fernando, there's a much bigger chance that George would have been able to overtake Fernando and kind of Fernando have him lose that position. So what Fernando did was the exact same thing that Carlos did with Lando in Singapore last year, and basically purposefully let the McLaren, Oscar this time, Lando last time, stay within DRS range so that they were able to stay in front of George in both situations. Poor George.
Yeah, George.
In front of George in both situations. And the reason, again, why they do this is because they would rather have one McLaren be as that kind of buffer to just have another obstacle for the Mercedes to get past. And it definitely worked for the most part. Now, when they did it in Singapore last year, it worked throughout the whole race, and it got Lando to get second place behind Carlos. In this point, it worked all the way up for like a long time, all the way up until the very last lap when George eventually did overtake Lando just because he had, fresher tires. He was a little bit quicker. And luckily it still worked in Fernando's favor because it was close enough to the end. George didn't really even get a chance to battle Fernando. Unfortunately, it knocked Oscar down to 8th. Which isn't bad. He still got good points, but it was a little disappointing that happened so late in the race as a McLaren fan. But it was a super interesting battle. It was one of those that like George almost overtook Oscar so many times, like lap after lap after lap. It was like right there, and Oscar was doing a really good job of defending, and he was doing everything he could. But just at the end of the day, his car wasn't fast enough. They didn't have the pace. Even with being in DRS range. So, but it led to just a lot of good battles across the board. Like even again, we talked a little bit about Charles and Carlos at the front of the field because of how the pit stops worked out and because Ferrari was able to do that, have Charles kind of save his tires out of where he didn't pit for like the longest time. He led a lot of the race, which was super exciting to see. And then it kind of, required Max and Checo to probably not pull away as much as they probably could have if the pit stop strategy for Ferrari was different.
Yeah, for sure.
It would have been, I think, a complete blowout because even despite them having those challenges to kind of work their way back through the pack with their pit stops, they still, they still definitely had quite a few seconds between second and third there. So yeah, I think it was a great race, a lot of overtakes, a lot of battles to watch. I think also, it was a good one.
We need to talk about how when Charles was leading, he was leading the lap on lap 17, which 17 was Jules' number. So that's just so like, I know I love things like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it is. And honestly, like Formula One is such a poetic sport.
Yeah, for sure.
The things that happen in Formula One, like, it's just so, like, things happen in a way that it feels like a movie almost.
Yeah.
A lot of times.
That happens a lot of times with sports.
Yeah, it is. It's just so, I don't know. You get like chills thinking about it.
Yeah.
No, it was a great race. Um, I mean Max won, but that's no big shock.
We also need to pray, manifest, send good vibes to the Williams mechanics because they have been going through it for the past couple weeks.
They're being worked to the bone for sure.
They really are.
Speaking of mechanics, we should also pray for the Sauber mechanics.
Oh yeah.
Um, Nothing's wrong with them; they just suck.
No, they're having a
So
nut problem, actually.
they need to figure out this damn nut problem.
I saw somebody on Twitter who's a fan of Joe that was like, we went from hoping for Joe to score points in his home race to hoping he just finishes his home race.
Yeah, poor
So,
poor Sauber. Yeah, they need to get their sticky nuts situated.
they really do.
Um, and I do hope that they get it together because I'd just be so disappointed if he is not able to finish
Yeah, that'd
in
be really
his
sad.
home race. And I just know that next week will be really special for him. I want him to have a good race. It's like Yuki, like in Japan. I want
Yeah.
him to have a good race.
Hopefully he finishes. Shall we do
Mm-hmm.
our champagne pops and champagne problems?
Yes, and actually, I don't even remember who I picked when we originally filmed the podcast,
I know
but
you
they
had
may
pop
have
too.
changed.
Okay. Champagne pop.
Champagne pop. I am gonna give my champagne pop to Yuki.
Okay. Yeah, it definitely
It was his
changed.
home race. It changed, yes. I don't even remember who I said last time, but honestly, I think he deserved it. It was his home race. He had a lot of pressure going into it. He had a lot of media obligations going into it, which can sometimes be a little distracting and hard to manage. And he had so many good overtakes. He got points.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this weekend, not necessarily all because of what he did, but more so because of what he did as well as what Daniel did, proved, I think a lot of people this weekend were convinced that, one, he's a better driver than Daniel Ricciardo, and
Mm-hmm.
two, that he deserves not only to keep his RB seat, but he deserves to be in the discussions for who's moving to Red Bull next year,
Yeah. I
if
agree, for
anyone.
sure.
A special shout out to Checo as well, because I think, again, in the same vein, proved that this weekend, he proved that he is someone that also should be talked about for that, Red Bull seat. I think a lot of times, even though he already has it, a lot of times people just assume that he's not going to be there next year.
Mm-hmm.
But this weekend, he really stepped it up. He proved that he can keep up with Max, and I think he had a great race. So I think I want to give him a little shout out as well.
Love that. I'm giving my champagne pop to Logan for the beginning of the race. We
Mm-hmm.
haven't really seen much action of him in overtakes this year yet, and he just proved that he's capable of it, and he, just needs to get it done, and we saw that. So he is getting my champagne pops. We
Yeah.
are ignoring the spin out for this one.
Ignoring it. Yeah, I actually
Champagne pop for a good first half of the race.
yes, yeah. And we didn't discuss it before, but he did at one point spin off and get into the gravel. He did keep it out of the wall, and he was able to reverse out of the gravel and get back on the track. Yes,
There's a
he did it in
champagne
a
pop for just that.
slightly dangerous way with cars incoming. Fernando and Oscar both had to swerve out of the way to not hit him, but he made it back. He made it back on.
It's fine.
So I think it was good.
Yeah. What are our champagne problems?
Champagne problem. I'm giving my champagne problem to Lewis. Another thing that we didn't completely discuss earlier, but Lewis had a rough weekend. He had a lot of radio messages where he obviously felt really uncomfortable in the car, and it's always hard to see someone like Lewis kind of seem like I don't want to say it sounds like he's given up, but he seemed like very
Dejected.
checked out, dejected. Yeah, very, very checked out, and almost like he Like, if there was a radio message where he was like, how's George doing? Should we switch? We can
Mm-hmm.
switch. Like, the Lewis from, 2016 would be shaking in his freaking boots if he heard
Nico
that radio
Rosberg,
message.
we heard his scream from around the world.
Yeah, no, literally. Because yes, George was faster, and yes, they should have swapped. But even like there was like the joke on social media where all these fans were mad that they swapped them and did team orders. But and then Mercedes responded was like, "This was Lewis's
I
idea.
know,
Like
yeah.
he's the one that brought it up to switch." So like,
Yeah.
it's just so hard that you know it does feel like a little like even if it was Max and Checo in the situation, and Checo was faster, and Max was feeling uncomfortable in the car, and he maybe didn't feel like he was getting the most out of the car that he should have been, I don't think he would ever, ever, ever say, you know what, we should switch. He would keep fighting until it was basically he was being forced to switch by his team, I think.
Not right, yeah, like not right now in his career he wouldn't. I feel like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
So
it's
it
just
is.
very
It was
shocking to see.
just, yeah. It was shocking to see, and it was a little interesting. I don't know if it's that he's just kind of moving through the motions of this year.
Mm-hmm.
He says that he's dedicated to scoring these points and getting Mercedes to the end and being successful. And I do think that he thinks he's that way.
He is.
But
He's
there's
not gonna burn any
definitely
bridges. Like he's not the type of
right.
person to do that.
And I don't think he's doing it on purpose. But I do
No.
think that there is definitely a bit of a checked out vibe to him,
Yeah.
and he's kind of focusing already on 2025.
They just also don't have the most competitive car right now, so it's
Mm-hmm.
understandable.
It's
Yeah.
easy for. I mean, it's so understandable that he feels, especially with the team that he's moving to. Like we're
Doing so
competing with
well.
Red Bulls. I'm
Yeah.
sure I would probably also be the same way. Where I'm like, okay, like let's just get through this year, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
I don't remember what I said my champagne problem was when we originally recorded. And I'm gonna give it to McLaren's strategy.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's difficult being a
Yeah.
huge McLaren fan. It's hard to give them champagne problems, and I know that later in this year I'm sure there will be a time where I have to give it to Lando or I have to give it to Oscar.
You've already given one
I think
to
I've given
Oscar.
one to Oscar.
Yeah.
But they had, I mean, after the race I would say that they definitely weren't fast enough to have a win, but the strategy they weren't doing them any favors.
I saw somebody say, or like, they're like, I wonder how the engineers and mechanics are feeling in McLaren after he gave them the silent treatment for the last 10 minutes of the race.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like, yeah, his car wasn't super fast, but I think that if they would have had a different strategy, he could have at least made it to the podium.
Yeah, it could have been a little. Woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Mm-hmm.
It's the name of the game, isn't it?
Yeah. There was our race recap for Japan. We have a bit of Indycar updates for everybody. Well, first, I believe it was last week we talked about how there was a rumor going around about Prima joining IndyCar, and just today it was announced that they are officially joining IndyCar for the 2025 season, which is so exciting. Like, when you think of Prima, when you think of like the lower feeder categories, like you're gonna think of Prima first. They're like the most like famous team. They are always like doing well. I'm so excited, and I cannot wait to see who they pick.
Yeah, it is super exciting just knowing that they're coming to IndyCar too, because it's such an iconic like racing name, and we obviously have much more access to IndyCar than we do to Formula One just because of living in the United States. So it'll be exciting to kind of see more like United States racing fans getting more familiar with it and learning more about it, and then of course it comes with an opportunity for more drivers to join IndyCar, and then being like, okay, who are the, kind of seeing who those drivers are going to be and where they're going to come from. Yeah. There's, always, Prima has a lot of ties with racers, Formula One racers and IndyCar racers already, just because, again, it's such an iconic name in F3 and F2 and all of the feeder series. So it'll be interesting to see what direction they go in and how they kind of build up a team from the ground up with them being such an iconic name.
Yeah, it'd be very exciting. They're working with Chevy for their engines too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I really have no clue where I was going with that. Anyway, very exciting.
Very
For
exciting.
another IndyCar update is um oh, I backed up Prima real quick. I hope Callum is on the team.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Callum will be driving for the number 6 car for Air McLaren in the Indy Open tests because David is still not completely healed, and it just officially came out today that David won't be driving at Long Beach either. So Callum has responsibilities at WEC the weekend of the Long Beach race, so they are trying to Air McLaren is trying to find a replacement for David. Lots of rumors that it's going to be Teo Porcher from who won F2 last year. He was in Indy this past weekend. It's all kind of lining up that it would be him. So we will have to see about that.
I
And
think it'll be super interesting to watch. I
yeah,
can't wait. I really am hoping David is able to make it back soon. But it is kind of exciting to see. Did you just sneeze?
I did, yeah.
Sorry, I heard something, but I can't see you still, so I didn't know if that was a sneeze. Bless you.
Also,
Um,
I muted my mic, so that's going to be so funny.
oh, it's fine. Um, but as much as I wish David was back and racing, it is exciting that the opportunities that it's giving some of these other drivers that normally
Yeah,
wouldn't be
for
put into
sure.
an IndyCar and racing this year, giving them a bit of a chance to kind of get that experience, but also get that exposure and kind of be
Yeah.
able to prove themselves. But yeah, like you said, he has responsibilities with WEC next weekend. Is going to be a very very busy. Not this weekend, next
2
weekend,
weekends.
21st.
Yeah,
Is going to be a very busy racing week. We
it
have
really will.
obviously the Chinese Grand Prix for Formula One. It is a sprint weekend, the first sprint weekend of the year.
Oh yeah, we
Um,
actually need to talk about that really quick. Actually,
yes,
no.
so we will touch on
Finish your
that.
thought. Finish your thought.
Okay, so yeah, we have the Formula One race. We don't have Formula Two. We don't have Formula One Academy, but we do have the IndyCar race in Long Beach, as well as the WEC race. So a
Yeah,
lot to follow, a lot to keep up with. Um, so that'll be super interesting. It'll be a busy week for us.
I'm excited to watch because I couldn't watch the first one, so I'm excited to see like Callum and Mick racing for
Mm-hmm.
WEC.
Yeah, it'll be good.
Um, Back to the Chinese Grand Prix. I'm scared. They
Yeah.
haven't raced there in 4 or 5 years. I forget how long.
Mm-hmm.
They decided to make it a sprint weekend. So many of these drivers haven't been there before. Like the 2019 rookies were the 2019 rookies the last time they raced in China.
Yeah.
And like Logan and Oscar haven't raced there. And also,
Yuki.
did you see that straight? I'm ready for a McLaren struggle bus. I'm ready.
McLaren is going to struggle for sure at this
Yeah,
track. And I think, honestly, a lot of the drivers will struggle. Like you said, it being a sprint weekend, there's not going to be um, a lot of, time to practice, along with, I don't know if this will hugely affect it, but it will be the new sprint format. And it'll be the
that's
first
right.
time
We
they're
haven't
doing the
seen
new
that.
sprint format. So that's going to be an adjustment for those drivers as well. It's going to be chaotic.
It's going to be so chaotic.
So hopefully everything goes well. I mean, also keep in mind that there are this is some of these drivers. One, if you think about it this way, some of these drivers have not been home since before Australia. And the
Yeah.
ones that have been home are doing these long trips back and forth. Like they are probably going to be exhausted.
Yeah, hopefully they can rest up this week.
Yeah. So it's going to be an interesting race. I'm sure there'll be a lot of drama and a lot of hopefully not a lot of issues, but
Yeah, hopefully it's fun.
there's gonna be. So it'll
I'm
be an
excited
interesting
for
weekend. A lot. It'll probably be a pretty lengthy recap episode with all of the racing going on.
Oh yeah, it will.
um Talking a little bit as well, a little bit about this is kind of veering off subject, but talking a little bit about endurance racing, we did get some gossip news about Le Mans. That's in June, and there's definitely some things being thrown around about
Mm-hmm.
some people possibly participating. I know you were talking earlier about Arthur
Arthur was
Leclerc,
doing Arthur Leclerc was doing practicing today for LMP2 cars, LMP2 hypercar, and he had the fastest lap time today, which is so cool. I really hope he's
which
that'd be
it would just
exciting
be
to
so
see.
exciting. We saw Seb a couple of weeks ago doing it,
Mm-hmm.
and he was recently on the Fast and the Curious podcast where he definitely hinted at wanting to maybe get back into racing.
He was
Um,
like, yes, no, yes. I was so confused by that the whole
yeah,
time. I'm gonna be
he was.
honest.
Yeah, it was definitely like I think he wants to leave his options open, and I think he doesn't want to publicly say yes or no because he doesn't want to necessarily seem like he's looking, but he also isn't
Mm-hmm.
going to like turn down an opportunity to discuss contracts for sure. And
Yeah.
we know Toto Wolff came out with a statement. I forget if it was last week or this week or what week, and if we've already talked about it or not. But Toto Wolff made the statement about how Sebastian is definitely always going to be a name that's thrown around, and he's never going to not consider to bring him onto the team.
Mm-hmm.
And then that gets into the whole like, okay, well, if Seb goes, and where's Kimi Antonelli going to go? Because right now everyone is convinced that Kimi Antonelli's getting the second Mercedes seat. And if he doesn't get the second Mercedes seat, is he going to Williams? And then if that happens, where's Logan gonna go? It's just. I think it's easy for us to say it makes the most sense for him to stay in F2 again. But as we know, Formula One and Formula 2 is very cutthroat. And I think if he doesn't take an opportunity to get into Formula One as soon as possible, he
Yeah.
knows that a billion and one things could happen that would cause him to not get a seat at all. So I think he would consider going to a lower team and maybe not taking the seat, because you can always work your way up to a Mercedes seat or a Red Bull seat or a Ferrari seat. We've seen that's what most people do actually.
Mm-hmm.
But that kind of puts Toto in a very sticky situation.
Honestly, I feel like we can talk circles around this, but I feel like he's getting the Mercedes seat.
Yeah,
Like, once again,
that's true.
from what we've heard Will Buxton say, it makes the most sense for Toto to sign him, have him get a year used to it, and then the new
Hmm.
regulations come in 26, and he is more
Yeah,
comfortable in an F1 car. Like,
yeah,
honestly,
I think so.
if Toto Wolff wants Kimi Antonelli this bad and he doesn't sign it for 2025, it's kind of dumb.
It's his own fault that he's going to get
Unless,
screwed over. He's screwing the pooch.
unless, Williams takes him, which, don't get me started on that because, actually, I saw someone say, James Vowles, please break up with your ex. I'm begging you.
Yeah,
In
literally
reference
break
to
up with your
him
ex.
taking Kimmy and holding him, which I mean, Kimmy for Williams would be great for Williams, to be honest. He's such a great driver.
Mm-hmm.
But
Well, Logan Sargent was a great driver in F3 and F2 as well. So
yeah, no, I know. Don't get me started on that. Why did you do that? I could go on and on.
yeah, it's tough. It's just so this season is going to be
Wacky.
so it's going to be crazy. But yeah, a lot of just as things develop, things are going to get, I think, even more crazy, and we're going to get more. Just it seems like each weekend we're hoping to get more clarity on what seats who's gonna be at what team next year, and all that we get is more possible people switching and more rumors of who's taking what seat. Like we never get like people ruled out. There's just more people added to the mix for each of the seats. So
yeah, it's insane.
mm-hmm.
We'll have to see. It's gonna be a crazy, silly season. Which
Crazy silly
has
season.
turned from like summer break being silly season to silly season being literally
It's just all year. Yeah. Another article came out that about Checo and how they think that they will have a final kind of like call on who's driving for the 2025 team within the next couple of races within the month. So that means that Checo Checo in the Chinese Grand Prix, Miami, like he's going to have to once again prove that he is good enough to stay on Red Bull and keep up with Max. And I'm sure that if Red Bull is wanting to look into getting something nailed down for 2025 within the next month, I'm sure Mercedes is also probably in that same boat. I think the lower teams have a little bit more flexibility with kind of pushing out any decisions made because, again,
they for sure do.
It's not as like, Mercedes wants to make sure they get the best, but it's going to be an interesting decision. And then, of course, the Red Bull decision, I'm sure will follow closely by the RB decision, and that's not even considering that if Daniel doesn't get it together by next race, Liam Lawson could possibly kind of move in, because I mean, he had 2 races to show that he deserved that RB seat, and the
Yeah.
first out of the 2 races he DNF'd for his own fault.
I'm
So
really nervous. Like, how's this gonna work? Is he gonna, and he could have just a complete 180 and turn these next races around and do amazing. And
mhm.
RB is like, all right, great, perfect, we'll keep you.
Yep.
Which, justice for Liam Lawson. Um, would he go to another lower team? Would he just, instead
Liam?
of being, no, Daniel. If he
Daniel?
continues his track record, would he go to a lower team, or would he then be like, it's my time, I'm retiring? I don't know. Like, I feel like he still wants it, has that fight in him, but like,
Yeah.
he
I
can't do
could
another I'm getting kicked out.
No, honestly, I honestly think that if Daniel were to lose his RB seat,
Mm-hmm.
he should retire.
Oh, wait a
But
minute.
again, he is still what?
Keep going. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh no, you're fine. I was gonna say he is still hungry to prove himself, and I think he's so like racing is truly like his life.
Yeah.
But I think that the only team that would accept him, like, they've seen what's happened. They've seen him, no offense, fail with a lot of these teams. He failed at Renault. He, moved to McLaren. He failed at McLaren.
Yeah.
He moved to RB as a, Red Bull's a reserve driver. RB, like, he's not. At first, it was just like, it's not the right team. It's not the right team. Well, if all of those teams aren't the right team, what is?
You can't keep using that as an excuse.
Exactly. I think that the only teams that would possibly take him would be a team that is looking for someone that has experience and is able to help with maybe develop one of their younger drivers. So I could see him maybe moving to Sauber if Valtteri were to retire and kind of help mentor Joe. I could see him maybe he would move to Williams. It depending on the whole other situations, him and Alex would be, I think, good teammates.
A lot of people have been bringing up IndyCar recently.
Mm-hmm.
Which I could for sure see him moving to IndyCar. He loves America.
And he loves America. I could see that.
One point, a lot of people were using it as like a negative thing. Like I saw someone be like, "Bye, Daniel Ricciardo. See you in IndyCar." Like, ha ha ha, whatever.
That pisses me off.
Like, tell me you don't watch IndyCar without telling me you don't watch IndyCar.
Yeah.
And that's coming from someone who has officially watched 4 races. Like, growing up, I for sure watched them, but like actually watching and paying attention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's it does kind of piss me off. Like, it's definitely different. Like, we know Formula One is so historical and it's so like the epitome of open wheel racing. I get that. But like, IndyCar is making such a huge, it's on the rise right now. There's a resurgence. And I think that IndyCar is definitely going to be able to be a little bit more competitive with the teams on who they bring in as they grow more popular. I mean, even then, like, you think when, talking with all of the people that have driven for both Formula One and IndyCar, so like Romain Grosjean, for example, like, he's like, it's amazing. Like, he's much happier in IndyCar. Like, it's just so different, and like, he didn't know what to expect, but he enjoys driving for IndyCar more than Formula One. And I think that the more exposure it gets, I think the better reputation it's gonna get.
Yeah,
I'm hoping. But I do think Daniel would do great in IndyCar, and I think that he would love the culture, and I think that IndyCar would love Daniel Ricciardo. I think a lot of teams would be lucky to get him.
Yeah.
So that would be interesting to see if he made that transition.
Yeah, it would. It's telling me my internet connection is bad, so we have to end this.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
You want me to end it out?
Yeah.
Okay. So that is our episode. That is the race recap for the Japanese Grand Prix. Thank you so much for listening/watching. Again, if you are listening on Spotify, make sure to give us 5 stars and subscribe. If you are watching on YouTube, go ahead and comment below. Give us a like, give us a follow, and follow us on all the other social media. We're on Instagram and TikTok and Twitter
Mm-hmm.
for under Podium Pop. Go interact with us on TikTok. We are the most active on there, so we'd love to see some comments on your thoughts about this race recap. But yeah, thank you for
Thank you.
tuning in, and we will be back next Monday. Next Monday with another episode. There's not a race, so it could be if any drama happens, we'll kind of recap that. There's a possibility we could do a special Taylor Swift themed episode that is kind of a backup, or my fingers are crossed because I would love that. So make sure that you are subscribed and have all of our notifications turned on so that you know that we have posted that.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.